and welcome to another episode of Enter the Minds of Nadine and your podcast.
Hello.
Today we have a very special guest.
Yes, Jessica is my future daughter-in-law, and I'm so proud of her. And thank you for being here today.
Thank you guys for inviting me.
You're welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Jessica?
So my whole career has been in nursing. I am a registered nurse, approaching 16 full years as a registered nurse, and right now I am nearing of my Master's of Science in Nursing degree on the Family Nurse Practitioner track.
Wow, that's amazing. We're so proud of you and can't wait for you to be my provider.
So, disclaimer.
So the disclaimer is, even though I am wearing my Family Nurse Practitioner student coat, you can't really see my name tag, but it does identify me as a nurse practitioner student, and nothing I am saying is meant to be practicing medicine. I am not licensed to practice medicine, nor am I licensed as a nurse practitioner as of now.
But soon.
Soon.
How much more time you have?
My program ends at the end of summer, so I should be eligible for graduation at the end of August. And then, of course, in order to practice as a nurse practitioner, I will also need to pass a board accreditation examination.
Yes, they make you do all that hard work, and then you still gotta take this big exam.
Still have to pass your board test, basically just like nurses.
So is this journey a little bit harder than nursing school? How would you compare the two?
So validating nurses everywhere, I don't think anything is as hard as your first nursing program. I was not an LPN first, so I can't speak specifically to that. My first nursing program was an Associates of Science in Nursing to become a registered nurse, and it was definitely my hardest degree, I still think.
Okay. Because I know nursing school for me was very stressful. It was hard, and literally had to take it day by day in order to complete my 4-year program. So I commend you for going back further to further your education. Mom also wanted me to go back to be a nurse practitioner, but that's not happening.
I haven't given up yet.
One nurse practitioner in the family is enough.
Join me in the misery of going back to school.
I don't want to be stressed. But before we start our topic today, we just want to say Happy Easter. We're recording this on Easter.
Yes.
And so just Happy Easter to everyone out there. And I just wanted to talk about some past Easters before we get into our main topic. When I look back on Easter, I just think about my kids when they were little. When we lived in Baton Rouge, we had a huge backyard, and every year on Easter, we would get like Easter egg. We would have an Easter egg hunt for the whole neighborhood. We would have Capri Suns and sodas, and the cooler out front, we would have bubbles, and we would have like Easter eggs all over the place. And there's this one picture of William who had 2 Easter egg baskets full of eggs. Like, he was very competitive when it came to hunting eggs.
And yeah, we would put quarters on some of them. You know, they had little extra treats.
Dollars.
But I enjoyed coloring the eggs with my grandchildren the night before.
Yes.
That was fun. It was messy.
I always loved coloring eggs with my mom.
Yes.
Aunts, whoever we were with.
Mm-hmm.
It
was just part of the fun.
Exactly. And I miss that now that the kids are older. They're both in their rooms right now, but Happy Easter anyway.
And you know what? I was tempted yesterday to buy Kayla and William an Easter basket.
You know, some kids are really upset, like on TikTok, that their parents don't buy them Easter baskets anymore. They're saying that even though you're adults, you still need to get one.
Yeah, because my god sister, your godmother, who we lost some years ago, she would always make Easter basket for everyone, and she would make one for me, and I would say, Shakira, why are you giving me an Easter basket? I'm an adult. And the one thing I miss about her being gone is my Easter basket. Nobody has gotten me one since. You know, so sorry about that. Next year I'll do better and I'll just get everybody an Easter basket. How do you feel about it?
I'll take any free chocolate that is available.
Well, Mommy, you all for Valentine's. We got everybody Valentine candy, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, I thought about it, but I got you. Got you.
So today we're going to talk about another hard topic. Since both Jessica and I are nurses, we're going to talk about hospice. And so first, before we start talking about hospice, I'm going to read a quote and then Mom will read a quote. Our worst fear isn't the end of life, but the end of memories. Our worst fear isn't the end of life, but the end of memories. And that's by Tom Brackman.
Yes, and the end of life deserves as much beauty, care, and respect as the beginning. Anonymous. And I would like to read that again. The end of life deserves as much beauty, care, and respect as the beginning. Because, when a child is born, we rejoice that. It's like exciting. The whole family is activated and wow, it's a new member of the family. Where that is how we should receive death under certain circumstances.
Okay, so first I'm just going to read us a definition of hospice before we really get into the topic.
Okay. Hospice care is specialized care that provides physical comfort, emotional, social, and spiritual support for people nearing the end of life. Your hospice team includes doctors, nurses, social workers, and home health aides, all who provide care that center on your comfort and dignity.
Wow. So what is hospice care? Hospice is a specialized care you may receive when your prognosis is measured in months instead of years, and comfort is the primary goal. Hospice can help you prepare physically, emotionally, spiritually as you near the end of life. The aim of hospice is to allow people to maintain control over their lives, live with comfort and dignity, and feel supported as they prepare for death in their own way. So, Jessica used to work in hospice. Can you tell us a little bit about your time working in hospice?
Yes, I will absolutely tell you about my experience. But first, I just want to say, as that little fact kind of gave away, that yes, I am the one that asked to talk about what is such a difficult subject for so many, even many people in the healthcare field.
Right.
Because I do have experience as a hospice nurse, and I just want to thank you so much for giving me this opportunity and platform to provide some of my experience and hopefully some information to help people understand this very specialized form of care.
Yes.
I had nearly 3 years of hospice experience, and I will say that, as I said before, I've been a registered nurse for 16 years, and I truly believe that my time in hospice represented the most good that I've been able to do as a nurse.
Okay.
So, as a hospice nurse, I started out in the standard hospice nursing role of what they call a RN case manager. That means that you receive a caseload of patients and you go and provide nursing assessment and care in whatever environment they may be in. Many people do receive those services in their own home or a family member's home that they've moved into, but others also receive that care at long-term care facilities such as nursing homes or assisted living facilities.
Yes.
I also transitioned in my role in hospice at one point to being their primary on-call RN for nights. So that brings us to an important point about hospice, and that is with these people that are medically fragile and have so many nursing needs You do have 24-hour access to nursing care, up to and including an actual nursing visit in the middle of the night. And that used to be me.
I was going to ask you, have you ever been called
Many
in the
times.
middle of the night?
Many times. I was available by phone during that part of my role with hospice from 5 p.m. to 8 a.m.
Okay.
I covered an area of 8 counties,
It's a lot.
Leon and surrounding counties. That seems almost impossible to do. However, the amazing care that these people receive during the day actually, would help to manage the number of calls that you would receive at night. They were so well taken care of by our whole team during days that you did not have as many calls as you might think. But yes, I could be called at night when people felt that their loved one or the patient himself felt they had a change in condition, they were having difficulty managing symptoms. And yes, when you're under hospice care, you are instructed that your first call, if your loved one passes, would be to hospice. And I did receive the calls that occurred after hours to go and provide final care for our patients that had passed.
Can I ask you a question? So I've never worked in hospice, but my main area was med-surg, and a lot of times when we did have deaths that occurred when I worked in night shift, it would usually be around that 5 o'clock a.m. hour. Did a lot of people? I mean, did that happen a lot in hospice, or was it just at any random time? Did you have more deaths early in the morning?
Early in the morning was frequent. Of course, you had them all throughout the night. I can't pinpoint necessarily a time that was maybe more frequent than another, other than to say that yes, those I would say from 3 until before dawn, maybe, which that's a kind of a bigger time frame, but those early morning hours, if I had to say, were maybe the most frequent calls I had at night for a death event. That's what we call it, when someone had passed.
So when you were working in hospice, did you go to people's home, or was this at like a hospice facility?
Again, hospice care is provided wherever our patients are. Sometimes that is even in the hospital. That's probably where we see the fewest patients.
Okay.
And the reason for that being is typically that occurs when somebody has been in the hospital, and by the time they choose hospice care, their prognosis is very short. And there are multiple reasons why they cannot be transferred home. So that is more rare, but in those situations, hospice care can even be provided in the hospital. And I have gone to the hospital to see hospice patients. More often than not, in my on-call role overnight, I was being called to people's homes, but I could also be called to nursing homes. When I provided care during the day as a daytime case manager, most of the RN case managers are primarily providing care in people's homes because that's probably the largest cohort of hospice patients. I was a little different because I had prior experience for being a nurse at a nursing home.
Okay.
They actually did my caseload from the nursing home patients in the area, in our county. So I would go really to wherever we had a patient at a facility, but I typically had, I'm going to say maybe 5 or 6 facilities that I had patients at on a routine basis. My caseload would be anywhere typically from like 12 to 18 patients.
Okay.
And I would go provide regular nursing assessments and collaborate with their nurses at the nursing homes to make sure that they were getting the best comfort care that we could provide them.
With such a large area that you were responsible for, were there times you had to call in backup because you had multiple, say you had 2 or 3, or would you go to one and the other 2 would have to wait till you got to them? How did that work?
So, great point. It was a large area, and even though I mentioned excellent daytime care made it manageable for me to be the on-call overnight nurse, you notice that I said I was the primary.
Okay.
So there was always someone, a nurse assigned as secondary to me, that if somebody had to have a visit while I was already seeing someone else and I knew that I wasn't going to be able to complete the visit I was at in a timely fashion and get to them, I would divert the call to my secondary.
Okay.
So although I am a big supporter of hospice, and asked to do this topic because I feel like educating people, addressing some of their fears about hospice, because we are dealing with folks with a terminal prognosis and death is such a difficult subject, will be, I hope, very beneficial.
Oh, stop right there. I have a question. Why do you think, because I saw this in a hospital, why do you think family members that have patients or their loved ones in the hospital are scared to put their family members in hospice? Do they feel like they're giving up, or that they're not going to get the care that they need? Because to me, I felt like they just maybe don't understand the diagnosis and understand the prognosis of what's happening with their loved ones.
On a specific level, I think it is that they do not understand or have truly accepted where their loved one is in the disease process. And so therefore, like you said, they don't want to be seen as giving up on a loved one. On a much more general level, again, I have to speak to my experience in America. This is my home and where I've always lived. I don't know if there is much of a difference in other industrialized countries. We have a pathologic fear of death. We don't deal with it well.
Mm-hmm.
We're unable to see it in positive terms. And I've heard this in several places. I don't know where it came from, but in America, with the huge healthcare system that we have, it said that every death is a murder. Something had to be done that caused your loved one to pass. It's like there's no natural deaths anymore. I think that is beyond healthcare. It's a huge societal issue that we are so fearful and unaccepting of death, no matter when it happens. We have people with loved ones that are in their late 80s, in their early 90s, and they still are not accepting that this person's life has come to a natural endpoint.
It's disturbing.
So part of your job was, of course, keeping the patient comfortable with pain medications and, helping with their oxygen level, stuff like that, comfort. But it sounds like another part of your job was educating the family members about what hospice is and the benefits of hospice.
A huge part of my role was providing education to patients' family, loved ones, including some of these people have longtime, extremely close friends. They're a big part of their care. And one of the pieces, this piece of education is one of the reasons why I feel like it was where I was able to do the most good.
Okay.
When you're working in the hospital, when you're working in the nursing home, which I've done both in this ever lengthening career, you definitely provide education to family members, to loved ones, but you are so pressed for time. And I'm not going to say you're not busy as a hospice nurse, but the nature of when you're at that visit, you are in their environment, wherever that is, and many times it's their home. So you have family members that are there that are comfortable in the environment, and you only have that patient at that time until you leave them. And there are some times where you finally have to say, well, I do have other visits, or I have another visit scheduled now, that they are able to get your undivided attention. It's a much better atmosphere to be able to provide education.
And most people don't understand that you're taking care of the whole family, not just the patient. It's like nurses, we take care of everyone.
Well, Attorney did extensive research, and I like to read this as an answer to the question you brought up. Does receiving hospice care means giving up? Research says absolutely not. Receiving hospice care means that you're advocating for living your life as fully and comfortably as possible despite the reality of decline in health. And I'm going to add that. Imagine, if I was on hospice, it doesn't mean that that's the end, because I'm one that believe that God is in control. But in the meantime, if they think I'm going to go in 6 months, if I could get medication or therapy or any kind of comfort so that I can have some quality of life, that is why you would be in hospice. Doesn't mean that I can't come off hospice, because it's a situation that both you as the nurse and the doctor assess periodically.
Mm-hmm.
So, and believe me, before you did this research, I kind of had my, I don't really know. I thought that hospice meant the end, but then I remembered, I'll tell you a quick story. My granddaddy, R.J. Sheffield, he was basically, and they didn't call it hospice, but the family came home 3 times to basically say goodbye, because the doctor said, he's not going to last. And Granddaddy said to us, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. And he lived 8 years before he passed. So he only had a little string of liver left. His liver was gone, so science said that it was time. But he said he wasn't going anywhere. And believe it or not, when he told me and my baby brother, I was in Guatemala, we were doing a 3-way phone call with him. He said, I'm not going to be here, because we said, we're going to come visit you in July. And when he said, oh, I'm not going to be here when you come, that's when he left. He kind of felt like he knew. 8 years later.
So there are a number of important points, that kind of branch off from what you were saying. I would not call electing hospice as giving up. But I do want to state that it's a whole different way of thinking, because a referral to hospice, which people can self-refer, maybe that's something that we can talk about later, but at the point at which you qualify, you can be certified, and that does occur, has to occur not through just one physician, but 2. You have to have 2 different physicians that agree that you qualify for hospice care. What that means is, in technical terms, those physicians are certifying that, to their best assessment and medical understanding, the likelihood is that whatever disease process or combination of medical issues you have means that regardless of what they were to do for you medically, you more than likely have 6 months or less. It's important to consider, given that physicians do not give up on curative treatment easily. And in fact, as someone who has been involved with hospice and thinks it is a great resource for the people that do qualify for it, they may, you know, there are many physicians that wait a little bit late to have this conversation with families because they, that idea of giving up. Medical professionals don't want to give up on you, but having been a part of hospice, I would completely reframe the notion of giving up to accepting the status of your family member and intentionally choosing to prioritize their comfort. Mm-hmm. And we keep saying that word, but what can it really mean for people? Has anybody ever been comfortable if you've had to be in the hospital?
No, the bed is like horrible.
Have you ever had, let me not say any comfort, because there are amazing care providers that provide us comfort. That's not a comfortable environment.
Most people want to be at home.
You want to be at home.
Over and over, we see research that state that people would like to be at home. And within our current healthcare system and everything I've seen during my career, for people in this situation, hospice is the vehicle in which you can receive the most care at home, where these people want to be. And honestly, where family members want to spend their time with them and are more comfortable spending time. These people want their family around them. Me and Latanya will go up and sit all day at a hospital with a family member. We're nurses. It doesn't bother us.
That's true.
But there are other family members that are not comfortable visiting their loved ones in the hospital. And they may go, but that visit may be shortened because they're not in a comfortable environment to spend as much time as they can with a loved one that may quickly be running out of time. So it facilitates people being in the environment that they want to be in, that they're comfortable in, while receiving an amazing amount of service.
And all the attention is on that person. They don't have to wait for the nurse or the doctor to come, whatever. They all have constant, whether it be you or a family member, they still have constant attention.
So who could benefit from hospice care? Healthcare providers use Medicare guidelines to determine eligibility for hospice care. According to Medicare, you're eligible for hospice if your life expectancy is less than 6 months or less, which Jessica stated earlier, if your illness were to run its natural course. Providers recommend hospice when treatments to cure your conditions are no longer beneficial, and providers don't expect your conditions to improve. Medicare, Medicaid, and most private insurance cover most hospice care costs.
Yeah, so that answered the question. There may be people out there who require hospice, and you mentioned it, but if you don't say, your insurance probably covered it, then they may reject it because there are quite a few people out there who don't have medical insurance.
So that is a very important point because unfortunately, all of our healthcare decisions are so heavily impacted by costs. Mm-hmm. Even with the advanced healthcare system we have, people lack access to care so many times. But I would say that during my 3 years of experience in hospice, hospice is well covered. It's covered by Medicare, Medicare Part A. Like Tanya mentioned, other insurances cover it. Most of our patients, I would say, are above 65, so they do have that Medicare coverage. Unfortunately, there are people that face the end of their life before 65. And in those cases, what I typically saw, although the insurance side was not my side, but what I saw was the employees within those hospice organizations that deal with it help those people apply for medical under specialized circumstances, or if they're not eligible for Medicaid, as the hospice employees would work with their insurance, many of which do provide coverage. I am not sure of the specifics, but when I brought up Medicaid, I believe that there may be some specialized access for Medicaid coverage for those who qualify for hospice. I'm not sure the specifics of how that impacts. There are regularly pretty stringent limitations on income, but it seems to me that they were able to get Medicaid access for a broader range of people when you qualify for hospice care. So coverage is available. And while we're on the subject of coverage, when you enroll in hospice, we've talked about receiving nurse visits. We've talked about that there are physicians involved with hospice. Now, you usually only see physicians for your recertification visits, but those physicians typically covers the physician visits, they cover the nursing visits, they cover the home health aide visits, which are absolutely integral to the great care that these people receive. But they also cover the home health equipment that you will need to care for your loved one at home, that loved one needs. As long as it is, all these things are, the visits from the aides, the nurses, the doctors, they're covered. The equipment is covered.
What kind of equipment?
So any equipment that is necessary to provide quality comfort care at home and is required because it has a relation to the illness, the terminal illness.
So that could be like a hospital bed, oxygen. Yeah.
It typically includes
IV machine if they need it at home, right?
Yes, there are certain situations where,
Well, maybe not an IV machine.
typically not a pump.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain situations which we will provide IV fluids at home, and all the equipment for that would be covered. Just like you said, hospital bed, which people don't think of, but is very crucial to keeping these people in comfort. Wheelchairs, oxygen, supplies.
Yeah.
That's a cost that a lot of people don't think of. I know many people with elderly loved ones that are still being cared for at home, and the expenses for adult briefs for incontinence care, Chuck's pads for incontinence care,
Yeah.
It bandages, syringes.
it adds up. But hospice provides all those supplies.
That's a wonderful thing. So we talked about doctors, nurses, home health aides, but there's also spiritual counselors. And they can help you process changes you experiences as you near the end of life and support your transition to the last phase of life. And you don't have to identify with a specific religion or faith to choose to work with a spiritual counselor. And then also social workers. So Jessica was talking about they can help you apply for Medicaid and help with those financial concerns. So they can provide emotional support, counseling, and assistance with advanced directives. So a lot of, don't most patients with hospice have to have a DNR?
No.
No? Okay.
That is a misleading thing.
Okay.
Is it appropriate? It is appropriate for patients if they choose to have that. But we do not require someone to have the DNR.
And the DNRs do not resuscitate.
DNRs do not resuscitate. It means that if your breathing or heart stops, we will not perform CPR to try to restart, and we will not perform the other more advanced administration of medications or shock therapies that are sometimes used to try to restart your heart. But it is required that you elect a DNR in order to have a hospice admission.
So I like the home health aides because they're the ones who would actually come one or more times a week and assist you in giving them bath, providing personal care, and even do like housework. And you have to understand, they're not going to come clean your entire house, but they're going to make sure that the area that is selected for the patient is sterile and clean in the bathroom and things like that. So don't get me wrong, clean your own place. But they also explain how the caregiver can best care for their loved one when they're not there. You know, usually what I've seen is like they may come to once or twice a week, but then what about the weekend? Or if it was 2 or 3 days as opposed to every other day, and you need to be able to care for your loved one, and they actually educate you on that.
The aides are a great resource for that. Of course, your nurse is going to reinforce and teach all that education as well, but they are also great teachers in hospice. Like you said, they're going to help with the personal care, and the great thing is like you said, they're going to teach people that are involved, family members, loved ones, how also to safely provide care.
So admit it, Jessica, I won't turn you guilty on it. If the health for that patient in the hospital is not coming fast enough, how many times have you done things that were not your area, but maybe a healthcare area, but they weren't there, whatever, and you took care of things?
Constantly.
Yeah.
Constantly.
But as a nurse, they said everything is our job.
I was going to say, that's the misnomer. When you say it's not my area. Nurses are basically unique in healthcare, and just about any job I've ever seen or had any experience with, even indirectly, and everything is your job as the nurse.
Okay.
Which is a lot of pressure.
Yeah. Do we have time to provide every piece of care to every patient? No, and that's why we desperately need aides. And they are a backbone of care anywhere, and especially in hospice. But in hospice, while being a nurse, I was certainly an aide, because you typically are not going to visit while the aide is visiting.
Right.
Sometimes we may combine visits in our role as technically being a supervisor of the aide to make sure that care was being provided properly and standard of care was being followed. But my aides were fabulous. I would do the visits they told me I needed to do as supervisory visits, and other than that, I intentionally would not visit at the same time as the aide unless there was some other reason, because it just provides more contact points with that family. And while I wouldn't usually allow time to give a full bed bath, that wasn't the priority for my visit. By, let's say, because the nurses are required to do, at least in most hospices, to make at least one assessment visit per week. Now, that can be increased based on patient needs,
right?
But that's the minimum. Like you said, the aides, it depends. The nurses and the physicians, based on the client needs and condition, will determine how many aide visits per week that client will get. It usually, like you said, will start at 1 to 2, but I've seen people that ended up having an aide with them during the last days and weeks of their life, 5 days per week.
Mm-hmm. And you know what, Jessica, you know that I'm a positive person, but it has to be said. In every profession, it's always that one. And you were blessed to have good aides. What would happen if you came across an aide that weren't doing their job, are you required to report them or what happens then?
Well, I guess it depends on what you mean, not doing their job. But in almost all situations, any nurse that works with a home health aide, certified nursing assistant is typically what their actual licensure is. And any nurse working with those certified nursing assistants are in a supervisory role.
Right.
We're not a manager. We're not worried about when you clocked in. But what we are legally responsible for is supervising your care of patients. And so my first thing is, if there was any deficit in how care was being provided, is to remediate. In other words, teach.
To educate them.
To educate your aide. That's your first step. Personally, you're within your rights to go ahead and immediately report, and depending on what was occurring, maybe that would be appropriate for a what we might say a first time offense. Typically that wouldn't be my choice. My choice would be to educate.
That would be mine. That was mine too.
And to follow up to make sure.
Yes.
To make sure that has brought the situation up to a standard of care. But I tell you honestly, in all the settings that I've worked in, I have had to provide additional education to aides. I have ended up having to report. That was not the case in hospice.
Awesome.
The aides, I worked at one hospice company for the 3 years. The aides we typically brought on typically already had experience as CNAs. And they do look for that in hospice. I'm not saying that it's a hard and fast rule, but because you're going to be having to go into people's homes and you don't have senior nurses around you to call in to help, you don't have other CNAs, they typically hire people with experience.
And they vet them. They make sure, okay, I like that.
So
good to know.
You typically, and I'm not saying it never happens, but you're typically going to have nurses and aides that, while they may not have prior hospice experience, they have prior patient care experience.
And I'm going to tell you the number one thing to include my mother, she's 82, that she referenced is she want to know who is coming to her home.
But she has home health, which is different than hospice.
She's not hospice, but
yeah, she has home health, someone to come and help her with her, medications or her wound when she had a wound, stuff like that.
But she has to know what kind of person is this that's coming into my home.
Sure.
If coming into your home and you kind of feel defenseless if you don't really know that person. So I am saying that to say this: when it comes to hospitals, according to your experience, Jessica, they vet them and they are sending the top of the line people to your home that can be trusted.
In my company, that was certainly my experience. All healthcare companies typically will run a background check.
Good.
Some places run a credit check. Now I see your expression. That seems a little funny, but let's think about it. These people are going into your home. They have access to what you have in your home.
Okay.
So somebody that has a problem with finances, I think that's where their thinking is in doing that type of check. And again, I'm not against whatever type of check that you need to do to be sure that these folks are safe, appropriate people to be sending to provide care. So they typically do their due diligence. Things always there's always a case of something falls through the cracks. From what I have heard, even from different companies, because of the nature of going into homes, and our focus on comfort and providing quality of life for people's end of life, if there are issues, that typically is not tolerated.
Good deal.
So is there anything that we missed on this hospice topic that you wanted to talk, anything else that we need to talk about?
You rightly talked about some of the other interdisciplinary team members, the spiritual care, the social workers. Many hospices also cultivate a group of volunteers.
Yes.
Now, again, it's pretty onerous as somebody who wants to volunteer because they are going to check out your background. You're going to have to go through some training in order to be a volunteer. But they do enlist these volunteers to provide services such as basically sitting. So you're a family of people trying to take care of your loved one, keep them at home. And you've got hospice care, and your aide comes 2 or even 3 times a week, and I come once a week. The aide visits are typically an hour or an hour and a half. My visit is probably about the same. That leaves you a lot of time where your loved one may not really be able to be left alone except for very short periods of time for their safety and their care.
So that would give the family time to like maybe take a nap, like
Shower,
rest for a little bit. Look.
Well, unfortunately, because these volunteers are so limited, and if there's anybody out there with a heart for it, I would certainly say, please volunteer with your local hospice organizations. You are so very needed. Unfortunately, because of the limited supply, it usually has to be limited to a primary caregiver that does not have anybody else that has a doctor's appointment or an important appointment.
Okay.
It would be great if we could provide even more coverage, but
so volunteer.
Typically we don't have the volunteers to be able to spread out that thin. Another great service that is involved with hospice that isn't a discipline is respite care. Again, this can be limited availability, which is sad, but hospices, some of them have their own facility, their own inpatient facility, and many of them contract with either hospitals or nursing homes. And let's say that you have been the primary care provider for your loved one at home for months, maybe years. And maybe there's a special occasion. Maybe you now have a child or family member getting married or something happening. Another relative that is having a huge birthday. And you really need some time away. You need to go to a different city. Or maybe you have reached a burnout and you need to recharge in order to keep on caring for your loved one. That's what respite care is. Respite care provides that family member a short stay in an inpatient setting with 24-hour nursing coverage, with aides on site to keep on receiving great care, and give you a very short-term break. I believe the limit is 5 days in a 30-day period.
That's quite a bit.
But it can be a real godsend for caregivers that don't want to miss an extremely, once in a lifetime event, or simply have come to a place where they need to be able to recharge.
And we learned this in nursing school. There is such thing as a caregiver role strain, where caregivers need a break and they can come overwhelmed. So just look out for that. If you need help, just please ask for help.
It can affect caregivers' health.
Yes. And so that means asking for help means if you're the primary caregiver, maybe ask your sister, your brother, your child, or somebody else to help and step in when you need help as well. So it takes a whole family. It takes a whole family, a village, hospital workers to take care of a hospice patient. takes everybody, it sounds like. So. All right, anything else for Ms. Jessica?
Well, I see that you have a note here that's a service that we haven't talked about continuous care.
Okay.
So as we talked about, hospice patients are fragile, and we often see where they develop new or increased symptoms that are definitely not allowing that patient to be comfortable. That can be what we call a pain crisis, which may be new onset pain, or like we said, increased pain. It can be respiratory difficulties, cough, shortness of breath, decreasing oxygen levels. It can be agitation.
Okay.
And agitation is something that it is a known symptom in a certain percentage of people who are going through transition, and that means basically they are actively dying. It may be in their last weeks to particularly last week of life. All these symptoms are definitely the opposite of comfort for the patient. They're scary for the family caregivers, and that's when continuous care might need to occur.
Okay.
So if I was your hospice RN manager and we had one of these symptoms going on, you're going to call me, and I'm definitely going to just come out for a visit like I would at any time. I'm probably going to try some interventions. We may try a new medication or increased dose. But let's say later that day, you call and we haven't got control of this symptom, or maybe things are even getting worse. That is when hospice typically use licensed practical nurses. They have licensed practical nurses that are what we call in the industry PRN, or as needed workers that can be called in and accept shifts when we have a patient like this. And they can go and provide care in the home. It can be up to 24-hour care. Again, sometimes it's hard to provide 24-hour coverage, but these LPNs will work in either 8 or 12-hour shifts. Some of them will even do 16-hour shifts in wherever the patient is. It can be done for our nursing home, but it is typically done at home because they don't have typically that nursing coverage. The LPN goes and they are able to administer medications more frequently, assess what medications are or other interventions are working, educate family members about what's working, and continuously communicate with the case manager like myself and the hospice physician to do what we need to do to bring those symptoms under control and get resolved. That's typically, a short couple of days because obviously we want to get that resolved as quickly as possible.
Right.
But that is a very important service that is available.
Well, sadly, I've witnessed at least 2 actual transitions, and one was consisted of a person who's having difficult breathing, and the other one was my neighbor's mother. She invited me in the room with them when they unplugged her, and she just went to sleep. There was no difficult breathing or whatever, so it's always different for different patients. You can't always expect the same. And believe me, the peaceful going was a lot easier than the difficult breathing because you want to breathe for them. It's sad. And I know you've been through it, right?
I was just thinking, who's the neighbor you're talking about?
Denise. Remember Denise? And then Denise is Megan's mom.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Megan's mom, Denise, and then her brother was
Wait, you mean
my
she went
coworker.
in there with her mom, you mean?
She did. Now, Kenny, Kenny is the one that was in the military.
Okay.
Because he was there.
We don't have to talk about
Yeah,
that.
but she was
Understand.
mean because he was too.
Yeah, I mean, death is hard, transitioning is hard, but the most important part is just having someone there with them when they're passing. Sometimes they don't want you there when they're passing. I notice a lot of times patients pass away after their family or their loved ones leave the room. It's like go to the cafeteria, get something to eat, go home, and they usually pass when no one is around, or maybe they're waiting on someone, and then when that person gets there and talks to them, and then they pass. So, hospice is a very important thing that we have as in healthcare, and I think that is very important. Of course, do your research, ask questions. That's what the doctors and the nurses are there for. Jessica, as she said, that we can educate you on it, and if we don't know it, somebody else, there's a lot of people that you can ask. And before we go, I just wanted to say what's the difference between palliative care and hospice care. Palliative care focuses on improving quality of life for people with serious illnesses. You can receive palliative care at any stage of a serious illness alongside curative treatments. The goal is to relieve physical, emotional, social, and spiritual difficulties that occur when you have a serious illness. Hospice focuses on comfort and providing an extra layer of support when the prognosis is measured in months instead of years. Hospice is beneficial when curative treatments are no longer helping, or when a person's treatment to no longer receive treatment for their illness or treatment for their diseases. With hospice, the primary goal is comfort, like we said many times today. Jessica, you worked there 3 years. What made you decide to leave hospice? Did it take a strain on you to see, patients die, day after day? Because I know that would be hard for me.
I felt very fulfilled with that work. I think it has to take a toll on you. Maybe I didn't see it at the time. But I did not quit hospice because of the type of patients that I cared for,
Okay.
or having to see them transition.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, as people in all industries know about, we had a change of corporate owner,
Okay.
and a change in leadership.
Say no more.
And
that could make a big difference.
That led me to leave that company at that time. But I am open to working with hospice again.
Okay.
They used nurse practitioners.
Okay.
When I was there, it was a pretty limited role at that time for nurse practitioners. They would help with recertifying the patients. As we said, they reassess to see if there are some people that get better while on hospice. Their function improves, and at a certain point, they do not qualify any longer, and they're discharged. They can pick up those services again if necessary. So nurse practitioners were used in that way. They were used for medication reconciliation, and sometimes for being the provider that was on call. They did not do visits. I was as the nurse. If there was a visit need, I would do the visit. But if I was at somebody's home in the middle of the night and I needed new medication orders or needed to provide an urgent update and get some treatment orders, they have providers on call 24 hours per day.
That's wonderful.
So it may be something that I work in the field again, because I don't know all the ins and outs, but as with all other aspects, the nurse practitioner role within hospice is expanding. I understand from a medical director of a hospice company that has moved here into our city.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much for talking about hospice today with us, and I'm sure we could talk about hospice for another hour. But before we get out of here, we're going to ask Jessica some rapid fire questions.
Yeah, you don't get away without getting questions.
So just say whatever's on your mind. So the first question is, what brings you the greatest happiness? What brings you the greatest happiness?
That's hard to say rapid.
It doesn't have to be rapid.
That is such a profound question.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this has all been about my profession. I think if you're the kind of person that remains a nurse for 16 years and thinks that the greatest good you did was with hospice, so I would say my greatest happiness is having connection with people
Yes.
and it being able to be a positive impact on people. I think that's what brings you great, true happiness.
Awesome.
I love that answer.
Mm-hmm.
I think I might know the answer to the next question is, what would your perfect day be like?
A day at the beach.
Okay.
I love to be at the beach. So
Swimming in the ocean.
swimming in the ocean.
What's your love language?
I don't understand that question. What is love language?
Probably if I have to choose the most important one, probably physical touch.
Okay, that's important. So, Mom's love languages, there's 5, and just to help me out, there's physical touch, there's acts of kindness, there's uh, quality time,
There's
gifts, gift
there's
giving,
verbal affirmation
and
and words of love,
words of affirmation, and then
gift giving.
gift giving.
I like them all.
And so, like, there's a test you can take, and mine was acts of kindness. Like, if someone is doing something for me, that's one of my love languages.
Well, make sure I take that test later.
Next question. What do you admire most about your mom and
I admire my mom's absolute indomitable will.
Mm.
She is probably the definition of perseverance and just dedication to what she chooses to do. She was a teacher. That was her career, and she has retired within the last couple of years, but she's continuing to tutor. So yeah.
you dad?
I admire my dad's absolute fiery free spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's a good one.
Yeah, he's free spirit, not to be tied down.
I love that.
Okay, so what is your favorite childhood memory?
Where does childhood cut off?
Let's say 18.
Say 18, up to 18, so.
Okay, that's a big range. Favorite childhood.
I don't know, Jessica, for you, 12, because I don't want to know what you did when you were a teenager. 12.
Favorite childhood. Well, maybe this is why, but I have very happy memories of family beach days. We typically didn't do like big stay over beach vacations, but we were close enough. We would drive over to like Fernandina Island, and I remember swimming in the ocean with my parents. That's how I learned, and eating sandwiches and chips on the beach and getting sunburned because we didn't know about umbrellas back then.
That's awesome, and it makes sense. Okay, so what is your personal motto? Favorite scene?
Like mine is live, laugh, love. That's always stuck with me. So, okay. She doesn't have to have one.
You don't have to have one.
That
Okay.
would probably be like something along the lines of my mom. That if I'll do what I set out to.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, I said what I said.
I certainly said what
I
I
think
said.
mine says you do you.
She says so.
I say that a lot. Okay, almost done. What's your go-to karate song?
Karaoke.
Karaoke. Oh, karaoke song.
Oh, it's been years and years since I sang karaoke.
If you were gonna sing something right now at the top of your head, what would it be? And sing it.
No, I'm not gonna sing
You
it.
can.
Um,
Come on, Jessica, you
I
have a
used-
beautiful voice.
I used to sing Black Velvet.
Okay, just give me a line or two.
Wait, who sings Black Velvet?
I can't remember. It was an old song when I sang it. I'm sorry.
What's your go-to karaoke? See, it's not that easy.
I would say Whitney Houston. What's the name? It's Saving All My Love.
Okay,
She's
good.
real ambitious. Whitney.
A few stolen moments is all that we share.
Okay.
Okay, last one, Jess. Who is your celebrity crush?
That's a tough one. I've been in school all these years. I don't ever watch anything. Y'all saw when I had to stay with you extendedly.
You didn't really get involved in TV much.
By the time I was done with schoolwork, I passed out in bed.
You can go back into childhood.
I mean, well, even today, I mean, you could argue with Idris Elba.
Exactly. That's my go-to.
You too young.
Morris Chestnut.
I'm not a go there.
We might not have mentioned earlier, but Jessica is my sister-in-law. She dates my brother. So yes, Idris Elba, I could see that going along with her childhood crush or celebrity crush.
Thank you so much for being a good sport with the question.
Again, thank you guys so much for having me and letting me talk about a difficult but such a very important, dear to my heart topic. Thank
Well,
you.
you know, Jessica, you have plenty in that field that you're capable of talking about. So we're going to say this right now. When you're ready to talk about a different subject, we're ready for you to be our guest again because we love you.
We do love you.
I love you guys too.
Jessica is a big Georgia Bulldogs fan.
Georgia Bulldogs?
Go Dogs.
Yes, we should have asked her some football questions.
And don't nobody say nothing about the Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia Dogs, just leave her alone.
Yes. Okay. Guess what? We have business cards. We're so excited. So if you want a business card, just message me, email me, leave a comment under our YouTube page, and I will be glad to send you one. But we're so excited that we have business cards. Every week we're just trying to improve, and we love you guys, and we want you to subscribe, tell your friends. If you know someone that's in hospice or has been in hospice, let them see this video. It's very important. And the whole point of this video is to educate, let people know that it's good to ask questions, you're not alone, and that you can have a community around you when your loved ones are sick during your difficult time. So thank you so much, Jessica, for being here today.
Thank you, Jessie.
We love you, and you guys have a wonderful, happy Easter. Or Easter would have been past, but I hope you had a happy Easter. Thank you.
Bye-bye.